There are so many ways you can go about building guitars, and this being America, having been no tradition when we began to fall back on or to guide us, everybody was on their own, and we really all made up our own way of making guitars.
Most builders, I would certainly say, establish one or two or three, or maybe more, models and produce those. And then you jig up to produce those. And then any work that you do for a musician tends to be customizing those models.
You know, we built like the models that were available. Martin guitars, of course, are the benchmark, have always been, and deserve to be.
Because the knowledge of guitar making was pretty much locked up in the big factories in the United States.
A lot of people were making that same crazy decision to make their own guitar at the same time, all independently though. We didn't know about each other until in the early 70s, the Guild of American Luthiers began. And only then, you know, did we begin to know that there were other people doing the same thing, and that was the beginning of the community. And a beginning that was all about the sharing of information. That was a means through which information was shared, the Guild.
And then the kind of a major breakthrough was the 1980 Guild of American Luthiers convention in San Francisco, where a whole bunch of us, I mean, it was like, that was considered to be sort of a watershed moment.
In, I'm guessing the late 70s, Todd took over LMI, and what he did that had a tremendously significant effect was he was instrumental in changing the climate from a secretive climate to a sharing climate. And he did that by creating the catalog he did.
The catalog is a pantheon of all of us that Todd kind of got a lot of people to write for the, so he had a sort of a Smith and Hawken concept behind Luthiers Mercantile, and that created a familial feel and an awful lot of information that came out of LMI, much more information in a way than even product.
Through the iterations over time, it went from a small but informative catalog. In other words, you saw materials, tools, etc. But with each material and tool, there was some luthier's explanation for why it was interesting, why that wood might sound good, why a wood might have problems in terms of humidity or gluing. And then there would be just informative articles, how to French polish. And there hadn't been much like that.
From Rick Turner and Tom Rebecki and of course, late Richard Schneider, LMI, Todd Taggart and Allied. And, they've all been very influential in the development of what was the Healdsburg Guitar Festival.
What the change meant was that the bullshit level dropped, the information level started climbing, and as it climbed and people shared ideas, the quality of work as well as the innovation level started just going crazy. I remember seeing a picture probably in the mid-70s of a Steve Klein guitar. I had heard of him. When I saw the pictures, kind of blew my mind.
My involvement in the show was primarily to do what I've always done, which is try to show the world that there's actually another way to make and look at the making of guitars.
More generally, the times were about being supportive instead of competitive, being inclusive instead of being exclusive. And so sharing information was part of a larger kind of worldview of the times.
But that's a tenet of most lasting religious paradigms and spiritual pursuits, that you get more than you give, and you truly can't give things away. And it's one of the gifts of being older, if you will, is you find that really works over time. And for us, the stuff that we've gotten from, as I said, aerospace, automobile engineering, other instrument makers, that's why we're where we are. So for us to be open source is truly no risk at all. There's so much mythology out there on guitars and what they do and on the internet. And I don't want to take away any of the magic or artistry, but really aren't mysteries, so to speak, unless you want to get down on the molecular level.
There are four realms, the way I imagine it and explain it. There's the structural, the acoustic, the functional, and the aesthetic. And it's interesting how interconnected, or the word coupled is used in the trade, these realms are, in that you can hardly make a move in any one of them without something being affected in other realms.
The thing that I got from Steve, and that I'm really glad to share, is that it didn't have to be like everything we'd seen. It didn't have to be an OM, a Dreadnought, thank you, or it didn't have to be a Strat or a Tele or a Les Paul. But in terms of the acoustics that I saw of his, there was a certain logic behind them.
First of all, this is the stupidest place to put a sound hole. You've taken a perfectly good piece of wood with the grain running through it and cut it right in the wrong spot and makes the guitar want to collapse. So Martin put in its X-brace thinking they were going to make it strong. They take two perfectly good pieces of wood, they put a notch in them, and they ruin both of them.
It took me 25 years to find the location of the X-brace that I do today, and incredible makers like John Montleone, for example, has an asymmetrical X-brace. You know, this is something that for many of us have discovered.
Fingerboard, carbon fiber, neck. And in that sense, the neck is almost the least significant part of it. Whereas most people think just the opposite.
Most guitar aficionados, certainly all guitar builders, have heard now and then somewhere along the line about Antonio Torres' paper mache guitar, built all out of the wrong materials, wrong in quotes. You know, I've heard that guitar, and it is celestial. It is the sound of the angels singing. You know, it's not just a good guitar made of paper mache. It's actually cardboard, actually, not paper mache. But at any rate, yeah, inspired by that. I like to remind people, I remind my students, and whenever I speak to a group, I'm bound to say at some point, remember, it's all about the music. And usually that advice is, you know, just a way to guide oneself, you know, design-wise. If you never forget that, you're likely to make more right decisions than wrong.
On some level, that's what the real musicians, and especially the working musicians, want. You know, they want a tool that's nice and that works for them.
I'm on a lifelong get poor quick scheme, and I'm doing great.
But because I leave these beautiful tools on the planet that other people can make music with long after I'm gone, the concept of that is extraordinary. And it really makes, on the days when I feel like I don't want to do this, it makes me feel like I'm here for a good reason.
The thing is, guitar should inspire. It should inspire and not limit creativity. It doesn't create anything in its own. In fact, one of the things that I like to remind people is the guitar is absolutely nothing until it leaves here. But once it gets out of here, it truly can change the world. And we've seen that. It's been used in ministry, education. It's affected international borders and things like that. So it's a very dangerous tool once it gets out there.
This also goes back to the original discussion about why do we take care of each other so much? Why do we look out for each other so much, and why is the word community so important in the world of guitar makers? Because we are a self-advancing group of maniacs, you know, and we have a very narrow focus. This is what we do, but it's a huge privilege to do this with your life, you know.
It has been an awesome run. There was a journalist that asked me after taking the tour, she goes, "Oh, this seems like so much fun. 40 years, it must seem like it just flew by." And I went, "It seems like about 40 years."
But, you know, like everything else these days with, you know, information flying around so fast, so universally shared, everything has been sped up, and Lutherie as well.
We've got to pass this on. Otherwise, we're like the Shakers. The young talent that's out there now is phenomenal.
If I had any advice, which I'm loath to do, that advice would be build for fun, don't build to make a living. Because it's a terrible way to make a living, and it's a really fun way to live.
This stump is actually my chia pet. I haven't watered the lichen in a while. See, it pops right back up. A tribute to Michael, Les Paul, and Steve Miller, and of course great advertising for EMG and their cool new pickup system. Are we having fun yet?